From solo dinners to Netflix and chill, I just can't imagine a life without TV shows. So here are the most popular ones according to Google Trends. And yes, you're definitely gonna see your favorites somewhere on this list. Let's start in 2004 with one of the most iconic sitcoms of all time. In 2004, Friends was in its final season. The series finale, to this day, is one of the most viewed sitcom episodes of all time, reaching over 52 million viewers on the day it was airing. While in 2004 Google wasn't as widely used as it is today, it still managed to get over 27 million searches in the month of its final episode. To this day, Friends remains one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, but we'll get back to that later in the video.
Mouth shut and stop asking questions. ABC's Law.
The premiere of Lost in late 2004 was an era-defining moment for television. The sheer success of the show changed the entire formula of how TV was operating. Most TV shows slowly drifted away from a more episodic formula to focus on an overarching plot spanning a whole season. The Lost formula, which was revolutionary at the time, has now become the norm in TV. But just how popular was it really? Well, let's just say that every time a new season started or ended, Lost was always the most searched show on Google. So yeah, you'll see Lost swinging around the top for quite a long time. The first major show to take Lost's formula and succeed was Prison Break. Much like Lost, Prison Break was an instant hit. Up to this point in time, Lost's popularity could have been chalked up to something like luck or just a talented cast. The fact that Prison Break was so much more successful than any other show on the Fox network was enough justification for other networks to also start investing into this formula of show. So in a way, while Lost was the one defining the era, Prison Break was who really popularized this style of TV shows. This new format became so popular that even older, long-running TV shows started to slowly change how they would approach their newest seasons.
Friend there, John wants him gone.
He's gotta go. You come?
One of these shows was The Sopranos. After coming back from its hiatus in 2004, the show became increasingly serialized. By the time of its final season, the show was completely revitalized, landing on this list multiple times. The writers and director really knew what they were doing, because as social media and online forums became more and more popular, and it became easier to discuss TV shows with anyone in the world, The Sopranos ended in an ambiguous fade to black, leaving fans rushing to the internet for more answers. So in June 2007, The Sopranos became the most looked up show on Google. Anyway, we can't talk about 2007 TV without mentioning the absolute GOAT that was season 1 of Heroes. Okay, hear me out. In a time before the MCU, a TV show where regular people get superpowers and save the world. Obviously that's gonna do incredibly well. And even a show that started as fantastically as Heroes was not safe from this next thing that changed TV forever. Something so massive, its repercussions are still felt to this day. The writer's strike of 2007 and 8.
Writers and talent are being strangled, not just economically, but creatively.
As the internet became increasingly popular, online media started to emerge. As the online landscape was completely different from what studios previously knew, there were no existing measures to protect writers and make sure they are compensated fairly. Things like residuals for online streaming just didn't exist. The studios obviously hated the idea of paying their writers fairly, and so it took a whole 100 days for the strike to finish. A lack of writers in an era of television shows with long coherent plot lines going into their next seasons obviously resulted in a catastrophe for most at the time running shows. Existing shows became worse, studios didn't have writers to make new ones, so they adapted and they started creating a lot of unscripted television. It was a time with more reality TV slop than ever before. Reality shows are basically a really cheap way to make a lot of entertainment that is still quite popular, even though not as popular as serialized shows. And the best part, people on reality shows don't ask for residuals. Once studios realized that unscripted TV is just easy money, they made sure it wouldn't go anywhere, and they kept making more and more reality shows. To this day, every major network has a huge list of reality television shows, and even streaming services like Netflix started putting on their own. The strike impacted existing shows especially hard. All the top shows at the time, like Lost, Heroes, and Prison Break, experienced a huge hit to their popularity, and an unexpected newcomer snuck to the top. Yeah, I'm sure you didn't see that one coming because I didn't either. Not only did Hannah Montana reach the top, it also stayed in the top few positions for a really long time. But my working theory on this is that people just didn't know Miley Cyrus's real name, and so when they looked up her music when she started getting her music career off the ground, they would always look up Hannah Montana instead of Miley Cyrus. I mean, the show was a banger, let's be real, but other than that, there is no other Disney show that landed this high, or no other children's sitcom in general that landed this high on the list, and so that's why I don't believe people were actually looking up the show itself. Still, according to Google, Hannah Montana was queen. One thing that has been true in television since forever is that a lot of shows need a couple seasons before they really start getting popular. One show that took the whole internet by storm in 2009 with its second season was none other than Gossip Girl. XOXO Gossip Girl. Gossip Girl proved that serialized shows didn't have to be big crime and action mystery shows to work well. Up to this point in time, it seemed like serialized dramas were mostly aimed at men. I assumed that studios thought that women would not care about overarching plot lines and would not be able to tune in every week to see what happens next. But Gossip Girl proved them all wrong because the show was a massive success. Fun fact, did you know that the term XOXO was popularized by this show? Later in the same year, a different show that mostly targets women and also got popular in its second season was True Blood. The True Blood formula was pretty simple. Take a strong woman as the lead character, use a lot of erotic scenes and also a lot of blood and gore, and all of a sudden you've got all of America watching you. True Blood was incredibly successful and was just another step closer to normalizing blood, gore, and sex on TV, which, honestly, in my opinion, ain't too bad. Once studios started to realize that shows that are appealing to women as well do incredibly well in their ratings, even if they have a lower budget than other shows, increasingly more teen dramas were being produced. In other words, 2010 was girl season. The internet's biggest winner of 2010's teen drama season was most definitely Glee. Not only was the show a really fun, lighthearted and relatable watch for most people at the time, it also released lots of banger songs. These songs were so good that by the end of the show, Glee had over 200 different songs chart in the Billboard Top 100. When both teen dramas like Glee and Gossip Girl and supernatural action mystery shows like Supernatural and True Blood are doing really well, you can bet your ass someone is gonna combine them into a new show. Welcome, Vampire Diaries.
Oh, we're down.
That's the world we live in.
The premise of Vampire Diaries sounds like something 50-year-old men in a boardroom came up with, but damn it, it worked and the show was a great success. While the first season from 2010 wasn't quite as popular, the second season that released in 2011 took the internet by storm. Well, you can't talk about 2011 TV without mentioning Game of Thrones. Yep, the first season of Game of Thrones started airing a whole 14 years ago. And just like you'd expect, the first season was already incredibly popular. Still, the popularity of Game of Thrones during its first season is not even comparable to how popular it got later on. Anyway, we'll get back to Game of Thrones once it reaches the peak of its popularity. Until then, let's discuss another show that came out in 2011 and also left a huge impact on the world. The Walking Dead was a genre-defining show, and funnily enough also the first show that was based on a comic book to land this high on the list. I feel like the popularity of The Walking Dead is often understated, mainly because a different show that came out on the same year was a little more popular overall. Just to illustrate how popular The Walking Dead really was, it's almost impossible to find a zombie-themed movie, game or show that does not reference it at all today. There were also a whole series of games made about this show that were incredibly popular as well. But most telling of all, one of the characters was featured in Tekken 7. Both The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones were so incredibly popular they would consistently stay among the top 3 for the next 7 years. Even though these shows were so dominant at the time, there was one show that in late 2012 made them pale in comparison with its final season. That show was none other than what many people would consider the best TV show of all time, Breaking Bad.
Walter White. You got me.
During the peak of its popularity, Breaking Bad had over 100 million monthly searches on Google. Still, it only managed to reach these high numbers during its final season. More precisely, right when the season started in late 2012 and when it ended in early 2013. In other words, if Netflix released this show today, it would have probably been cancelled before season 3. In 2014, a new show took the spotlight, and for the first time since 2004, it was British.
There is a man in there about to die. The game is on. Solve it!
Just like many other shows, Sherlock only really started getting popular during its 3rd season, and many viewers were really frustrated with the slow release of new seasons at the time, because the 3rd season came a whole 4 years after the initial release of the show. Fun fact, the showrunner or writer and director of Sherlock went on to become the showrunner of Doctor Who as well during some of its best seasons. I'm sure you've noticed already, but this list does not include any cartoons or anime or any otherwise animated shows. If you want to see a video looking at animated shows and their popularity, just subscribe, as it's gonna be one of our next videos. We're still a very small channel with less than 6,000 subscribers, so any subscribe helps. And obviously don't forget to like and comment as well. Thank you, and on to the next one. During the peak of Netflix, in 2016, during a time where they had pretty much any show you can see on this list on their streaming service, they ended up producing their own TV show. And this one was not just like any other show. It was one of the most popular shows of all time. A show so popular it almost single-handedly was responsible for Netflix's survival during the streaming wars. It is also one of the driving factors that repopularized vintage aesthetics. About 1 year after the release of Stranger Things, a different show we've already talked about reached the heights of its popularity with Season 7 of Game of Thrones.
The Great War is here.
Calling Game of Thrones popular in 2017 is an understatement. Game of Thrones was such an incredibly huge cultural phenomenon. You could not go anywhere without hearing about it. And this was most especially the case during the run of its 7th season that started in June 2017. Game of Thrones managed to reach over 350 million monthly searches, effectively becoming the most searched TV show in the whole history of Google. To this day, there is not a single show that broke this record. As we all know, the next and final season was a massive disappointment to all fans. So even though the fame from the 7th season carried it pretty far, it didn't even get close to the numbers that you could see in 2017. Up to this point in time, streaming services were great. They were a really good alternative to piracy because you could have pretty much every show you can think of on the same streaming service. But after seeing just how big of a thing Netflix was at the time, other networks also wanted a piece of that pie, so they started retracting their licenses to their old shows that they gave to Netflix and started hosting more and more original content on their own streaming services. When before you could just pay $10 a month to watch pretty much anything on the same service, You now had to choose which service you wanted to subscribe to, and it would probably cost you about $20. All of a sudden, every single streaming service was fighting to get customers onto their own platform. In other words, the streaming wars began. In the beginning of the streaming wars, Netflix was definitely on top, and most of their original shows landed onto this list. But now that customers were getting more and more divided, not a single one of these shows will ever reach the heights that others did previously. In order to stay on top of the race, Netflix decided to invest a bit of money into foreign productions. One of the first non-English shows to really shine and set a precedent was Money Heist, or Casa de Papel. The Spanish grand heist serialized drama was incredibly popular all over the internet. It is also the first non-English show to land on top of this list. Working with Spanish and other foreign studios was obviously a lot cheaper for Netflix than to produce shows in the US, but up to the release of the first season of Casa de Papel, Netflix didn't quite fully commit to working with foreign studios, but the sheer success of this show set a precedent for Netflix, which then later on brought us some of the best TV shows of all time. But let's not get too hasty here, we'll talk about that one later. Before that, let's talk about Diriliş Ertuğrul.
Ölme boyun eğmeyeceğim. Sonsuza kadar adalet, sonsuza kadar hürriyet.
Just like most of you, I also had never heard of this show before starting to work on this video. What surprised me the most is that the show is from Turkey and not from India, simply because Turkey's population is not as big and it's not exactly known for its cinema and television. So I did some research, and it's kind of hilarious why this show was so popular at the time. Just for some more context, this show is about the founder of the Ottoman Empire. It was extremely popular primarily in Turkey and in the Middle East, and it was in its 5th and final season during the time it landed on top of this list. The show itself is pretty polarizing or controversial because of its nationalist themes, and it's exactly these themes that got politicians talking about banning it in India. So, right before it was banned in India, it had a huge surge in popularity because people heard about it through this and then started googling it and trying to watch it. In other words, they achieved the exact opposite of what they were trying to do. Anyway, back to what we're all familiar with. I think you all know what happened in 2020. That's right, they officially announced the Friends reunion special. Oh, and also there was like a pandemic or something. But anyway, Friends.
An experience of huge comfort.
Oh my God!
We felt like we had these friends.
I love you guys so much.
Ever since it ended airing in 2004, Friends has never left pop culture, as it's still one of the most streamed shows to this day. During the pandemic, as people were stuck at home and lacking social interactions, the reminder of Friends through the announcements of the reunion special quickly gave it back the status as the most searched show on the internet. It's crazy to think that a show that ended all the way in 2004, a whole 16 years later, became the #1 most famous show of the world again. Up to this point in time, Netflix was slowly losing its position as the top player in the streaming wars, but none of the originals from other channels could quite compare to the popularity of Stranger Things. Until, in late 2020, Amazon decided to challenge that.
Pardon my French. Fuck those fucks.
The Boys is a show that capitalized on the superhero craze at the time, but also gave it a dark twist to make it more original. Not just that, they were also given a considerable budget and had some really strong star power in the main cast. But that alone would not have been enough to make the show as big of a hit as it was. No, they needed more, and Amazon delivered. They spent so much on marketing, you could not go a day without seeing an ad for The Boys. Even after all of that, The Boys only managed to take the #1 spot for a few months in 2020. After Amazon's somewhat success, it was now Disney's time to shine.
This is the way.
We are an unusual couple, you know?
Oh, I don't think that was ever in question.
First, Disney's exclusive Star Wars TV show The Mandalorian got on top. Then, after Netflix's Bridgerton got the top spot for a month, WandaVision came in and changed that again. WandaVision was the first Marvel TV show that had the main cast from the movies actually be the main cast in this show. Up to this point in time, all of Marvel's TV shows, while sometimes having a cameo from the main movie cast, was usually centered around other actors because it was cheaper to produce. Not only was the show directly connected to the MCU plotlines, it also combined Marvel heroes with a traditional sitcom. This is a very unique show, and it was executed in a kind of okay way. But WandaVision was not where this ended for Disney, as their next show, Loki, also got on top. Just like with WandaVision, Marvel used one of the characters from the main cast to produce this show, and just like WandaVision, it was a huge success once more. 2021 really seemed like it was going to be a huge win for Disney, until Netflix came in with their international shows again. Oh yeah, it's Squid Game time. Squid Game was the first show in a long time to really massively rank on top of other shows on this list. At one point, Squid Game Season 1 was searched more than 250 million times in a single month. Yeah, calling this show huge is an understatement. It didn't quite get as many searches as Game of Thrones, but in the era of streaming, getting to 250 million might even be more impressive overall. And one more thing that makes it even more impressive is that this is the first Asian show to reach the top of this list. The show is simple enough to be a fun, casual watch, but also deep enough to put some more thought into it. The characters are captivating, the performances were great, and most of all, the English dub was horrible. The show is great and I really understand why people like it. I'm just really surprised that it became as popular as it is considering the bad English dub and the fact the show is from Korea. With the premiere of Squid Game, Netflix took the clear lead in the streaming wars in 2021. Fortunately or unfortunately, streaming also meant the end of weekly releases. In a way, it's good because you can binge the whole show that you want to watch in one go and you don't have to wait a week every time. In a different way, it kind of removes the fun of waiting every week to see what happens next. This is also reflected in this list pretty clearly, as a lot of shows get onto the top position for just a month or so. I couldn't cover all of these in my commentary, so here's a little montage of a few shows I might have missed.
I want my sister to be happy. Can you make her happy?
It doesn't make any sense.
Is everyone having a good time tonight?
Finding it? That's where your fun ends.
We finally have interns again.
The bus flipped over. We have a number of patients who have brain injuries.
This just got super real.
Just a few months after the release of Squid Game, in early 2022, Netflix released Euphoria. Euphoria was another one of those bangers that really took the world by storm. Most likely due to a naked Zendaya, to be honest. Well, that, and it was a competent teen drama that is still popular to this day. At its peak, Euphoria was searched more than 100 million times in a month. Considering that it is a Netflix show, it really just cemented Netflix as the top streaming site. But Netflix wasn't done there, because later that same year they released a new season of Stranger Things. This season was more popular than any of the previous seasons before, reaching over 160 million monthly searches.
You have lost.
Going into 2022, it looked like no one could quite beat Netflix. Stranger Things was a huge success and everything seemed great, but Netflix was not quite done there. Later that same year, they released a show that, through the magic of TikTok, reached the #1 spot on this list. That show was Netflix's Wednesday. Wednesday was originally meant to be another one of those cheap-to-produce teen dramas for Netflix, but a single dance from the show became a TikTok trend. The internet did its thing and the show got over 150 million searches at its peak. It stayed on the top position for 4 whole months, until the TikTok trend died. After Wednesday, for more than a year, not a single TV show could reach over 60 million searches in a month, and a lot of different shows battled for the top spot. So here's a montage.
Now they see you as you are.
You are a fucking nobody.
Is that so?
레기, 네가 처리해. 내 남편과 결혼해줘.
己の務めを果たす覚悟はできておるか?
각오는できておりまする.
자신이 있었다고. 근데 그게 잘 안 된다고.
Progress.
Can't stop it, John.
Watch me.
What the fuck is this? How the fuck is this?
Squid Game really did a lot for K-dramas all around the world, as both Queen of Tears and Marry My Husband briefly became the most searched shows on the internet. Even so, a lot of other shows also briefly became the most searched shows. 2023 and most of 2024 really didn't see any culture-defining shows, with not a single one reaching over 60 million searches in a month. Not only that, most shows really only stayed on top for 1 month, and sometimes 2 if they were lucky. But in late 2024, everything was changing again, because Squid Game was back. Just like with its first season, Squid Game took the whole world by storm once more. For some reason, Google doesn't want to accept Squid Game as one show, so it separates it into Season 1 and Season 2. But still, in total, Squid Game got over 240 million searches. This effectively made Squid Game the first show after Squid Game to get over 200 million searches. It's crazy just how dominant this show really is. Today, while streaming has gotten worse than ever with outrageous pricing and really limited libraries on each service, we just can't deny that the TV show landscape has gotten better. There is so much more variety of interesting shows to watch than ever before. The only problem really is how to watch them, which is also why we're seeing a new rise in piracy. If you're still watching at this point, thank you. This video was a ton of work to make, so I really hope you enjoyed it. If you can leave a like and comment, that would be great. Let us know what you think, let us know what else we might have missed, and if anything that I said was wrong, because I might have made a mistake or two somewhere. And yeah, see you next time on our next video about cartoons and anime. Have a good one.